this month is death. I don't know about y'all, but death is a pretty heavy topic. It's hard, especially here in Oakland, where some of our communities here are disproportionately affected by death at a regular occurrence. I'm really proud to invite Pen today. Pen is a journalist, an author, an educator, photographer, and growing up in Oakland and going through all those pursuits, he's gained a unique perspective on death. He recently came out with his memoir, a coming-of-age memoir about a boy in Oakland who grew up listening to his elders. So please help me give a warm welcome to Pendarvis Harshaw.
Do I need the clicker? Is that the air horn sound? So that's my name. I like this one a little better than the one on Broadway that says death by it. That's kind of hard waking up. My name is Pendarvis Harshaw. I'm a journalist and an educator from Oakland, California. I grew up right here. When I say right here, I mean right here within these walls, right? Well, next door. Youth radio. Youth radio is where I learned my craft. I learned so much from youth radio, beyond journalism, really how to hold my own as a young man in Oakland and tell the stories of this town that I grew up in. What I wanted to do today is share with you a little bit about my career path, and then I'm going to tell you a little bit about this book that I wrote, share from you this a portion of this book, and then we're going to open up a dialogue. But before we get anything started, I wanted to have a quick icebreaker because I know we have a lot of people in here. I just wanted to make sure everybody's awake and alive and moving. So if we can, turn to a neighbor and tell them, share with them, I may be prying, but share with them how old you were when you lost someone you knew. And if you care to, tell them what happened. I will give you 47 seconds. So just give me some feedback. My friend here, third from the right, for last row, sir with the plaid on. Yes. Who'd you talk to and how old were they when they lost a friend?
I shared with Lauren.
And what did you share with Lauren?
I was 14 when my grandfather passed away.
14. Thank you for sharing. I'll take my friend here with the camera. Did you share any with anybody?
Yeah, I shared with Naima. One person that, I've had friends, I haven't had a lot of people die in my life, but one was my great-grandmother. Like, she was like the person that kind of held the whole family together, and after she died, like, we don't even see or talk to each other.
And how old were you when that occurred?
I was 15.
15, 14, 15. Okay, taking notes. Thank you. And I'll take one more. Here, second row on the far end.
So my friend lost her friends when she was in college, but it was a really bad accident, and they died because of negligence from the ambulance.
Oh, wow. Thank you for sharing that. Thank you. I just wanted to get an idea of some of the ages and some of the experiences out there before I share my story. So keep that in mind. We'll get back to this in a second, but I wanted to go through just a brief slideshow, and I mean brief, real brief. That's me juggling the world. I show this to you because to prove that I once had hair. No, I show this to you because I think about this often, especially in terms of this profession of journalism, education, and kind of community activism, if you can call that. But I think of myself as a bridge builder, connecting people, and that's one of the things that I've been blessed to do. And so that's me. This is the first piece one of the first pieces that I wrote and got published, and it aired on National Public Radio. The connection between violence and teen parents, which I unofficially called Babies and Bullets. It was about a friend of mine who passed in East Oakland on East 28th in October of 2006. It took me into July to write it and really bring myself to write it. At the time, I was 18 years old, and youth radio helped me out a lot with that process, with not only publishing a piece about my friend who had passed and the fact that he had recently had a child, but also just the healing process. I remember just after this piece, or just before this piece was published, youth radio took me to a trip to New York, just to get me out of Oakland for a minute, just to see something different and bring me back to Oakland and say, okay, now I have a new perspective on myself and also the world around me. So from that initial piece, I realized I had something going with this journalism thing. I initially wanted to be a rapper. Who does that, right? But I realized I could tell stories without having them rhyme over a beat, and people would listen, go figure. So I started writing more about black men in the media, and unfortunately, black men's death. And so there were a lot of instances of police shooting that are major headlines, and I decided to write about them. One of the first ones I wrote about was the Oscar Grant shooting. That happened in 2009, 1 month before, the same month President Barack Obama was inaugurated. And so I remember seeing that and being like, I don't think too much has changed. And so that was a bit of this piece. So as I grew, I realized I could do more with this media and storytelling. And one of the stories that I told was of this graffiti artist named Mike Dream. Mike Dream Francisco was from Alameda. I see a hand fist pump in the back, so we're familiar with Mike Dream. This dude was a legend before the internet. Like, that should be an asterisk. They talk about like the steroids asterisk in the Hall of Fame. No, being a legend before the internet is an asterisk you need next to your name. His pictures are in France before the internet, in magazines in France. Like, I don't know if he could read French. He's a Filipino artist. Like, this dude was a legend when it came to graffiti. On top of that, he really lived what I call the Malcolm X narrative arc, where he was a product of his society. You know, he was a kind of a hustler in his younger years. He got politicized, and he started turning his craft into showing the politics through his craft. So he started out with a crew called TDK, Those Damn Kids. And then that acronym matured as they matured, and it turned into Tax Dollars Kill and Teach the Kids. And every once in a while, when they had to, it was the Dark Knights, if you want to. Mike Dream was murdered at age 30, 1 year after his son was born, Akil. Akil now is 18 or 19 and is a freshman at Hawaii playing football. I did a documentary on not only Mike Dream and not only the crew TDK, as they still paint to this day, but also a little bit about Akil. And I think that also ties into the babies and bullets kind of narrative. I don't just write about death. I don't want you guys to get that idea. I also write about cool things like technology in cars, and this is over in Alameda, a real fancy car. It's like a self-driving car from like 2080. Don't worry about it. We'll probably never see it. I also write about Oakland, East Oakland. This is about the Black Panthers. Their school was in East Oakland on 62nd and International Boulevard, which is now a Men of Valor building where formerly incarcerated gentlemen can go, have housing, find employment. And I always thought it was impressive that this building held change, community change. And so I wrote this piece. And then I also wrote about fishing in Lake Merritt. This is one of my more recent pieces. I saw this guy fishing in Lake Merritt, and I stopped in my tracks, and I just wrote a piece about it. And I like to think that this isn't about death, but fishing in Lake Merritt. Yeah, about that. So what we're here for today is this OG project. I started this in 2011. I was teaching at Oakland Tech, a class full of 20 young black men, and they were just on their phones all the time. And I was like, you know what? I got this idea to interview elders, take a photo of them, get a quote from them, and throw it on this website. I'm going to start it today. And I threw it on a Tumblr. At the time, Tumblr was immensely popular. And the guys in the classroom would be like, hey, you know what? I know OG, but I never knew his name, or I never knew his story, or now I want to talk to my grandpa and get his story. And I really felt like that was necessary, being a 20-year-old young man and saying, you know what? I need to be that bridge. I need to build that bridge between generations because there's an intergenerational gap. And I think that there's knowledge is falling in between that gap. So we need to build that bridge to pass on that knowledge. So I started this website, ogtoldme.com. It still stands to this day, although I'm no longer doing interviews. I've interviewed people like this guy. Anybody knows who he is? Harry Belafonte. Come on, man. That's like the man. Interviewed people like this guy. Anybody knows who that he is? His name is up there. That's Bill Russell. Man, when I saw Bill Russell in West Oakland, he is from West Oakland. When I saw him in West Oakland in McClymonds High School, I'm like, oh my God, Bill Russell. He's won 11 NBA championships. He just got a Presidential Medal of Honor from Barack Obama. Like, he's the man. Let me go humbly introduce myself. Mr. Russell, can I have a minute of your time? And he's like, did you catch him? And I was like, did I catch who? And he was like, the guy who stole your razor. And he was like, he was roasting my beard. Like, this 6'9" living legend is like, it's humble to be that humble just to crack a joke with me in the high school hallway. I was like, man, you need a razor too. This is one of the best stories I encountered in my OG Told Me project. His name is Donny Steiner. Donny Steiner, in short, is the Forrest Gump of the civil rights movement. He's encountered a little bit of everybody. He was a part of what was called the US organization. Show of hands if you're familiar with the Black Panther Party. All right, show of hands if you're familiar with the US organization. All right, everybody except for her gonna learn. The US organization, they started Kwanzaa. Show of hands if you're familiar with Kwanzaa. All right, cool. So they started Kwanzaa. They had Fu Manchu mustaches. They wore dashikis. They really believed that culture change led to change in the community. And the Black Panthers mostly believed that political change would lead to change in the community. They both came out of, were a response to the Watts riots. And they both were based in, well, Black Panthers were started here, but obviously they had a base in LA as well. There was a clash between the two, somewhat of just like a friendly clash, you know, like, hey, we have difference of opinion, but we can learn to coexist. We're still gonna take karate classes together. The FBI actually saw that clash and started to fan the flames and send letters from one group to the other. And this led up to actual gun battle in 1969 on the campus of on the campus of UCLA. Donny Steiner and his brother were charged with plotting to kill two Black Panther leaders who were actually killed that day. Although Donny stands by that he didn't pull the trigger, there has never been evidence that he has. He was sentenced for plotting to kill these two Black Panther leaders. The short form of his story is that he gets sent to San Quentin. He and his twin brother get sent to San Quentin. While in San Quentin, they realize that the guards have it out for them. They escape San Quentin, run to South America. Donny, escape San Quentin. When people ask him how he got out of San Quentin, he's like, really fast. Donny started a family in South America. He was in Suriname and Guyana. He realized that there was political turmoil in those countries. He wanted to come back to America so his kids could have a brighter future. He turned himself in, continued to serve his sentence at San Quentin. He was released, I believe, close to 3 years ago now, as the prison system in California is like, yeah, you guys know the situation, the prison system in California. So he was released on his own recognizance, and he has since been serving the community, and it's an honor to be in contact with him and to talk to him about his experience as a living legend. So that's one of the best stories that I've encountered through OG Told Me. A couple of people that I've interviewed have passed, and I just wanted to, now since we're talking about death, I wanted to bring up their photos. This gentleman on the right, his name is actually Felix Right. A couple notes on him. Felix Right and his wife were married for 75 years. That's a picture of Felix Right holding up a picture of he and B.B. King, who has also passed. Felix Right lived to be 103 years old. This is Gustav Lee Collins. Gustav Lee Collins is in the West Coast Blues Hall of Fame. I would see him walking around Oakland with a tote bag, going from performance to performance. This is at Pizza Parlor, I believe it was called, on Piedmont Avenue, which has also since closed. So not only have we lost Augusta, we have also lost that pizza spot that he performed at. I just love seeing Augusta in traffic all the time, so I wanted to honor him. This gentleman, oh man, Ronald Elder Freeman was he was a field marshal for the Black Panther Party in Los Angeles. He and Donny actually crossed paths. Elder Freeman is pictured holding up a picture of he and a couple of other Black Panthers coming through Los Angeles airport. Just a very proud man and really just believed in community change. I wanted to bring up his quote: "If you think that the system doesn't work, then show that it doesn't work." And I really took that to heart, especially as a journalist. Anybody know who that is? The late Dick Gregory, comedian, activist, FBI's most wanted list, or top 10 most wanted list initially, just for being a comedian and sparring, kind of stirring up the people. I met him in North Oakland at a church. The quote that I took away from him was, "My homework ate my dog." I loved it because it really flipped the system on its head, and that's what he was talking about. This gentleman is actually still living, but I actually wanted to show him because it was one of the most powerful interviews that I had around death. His name is Willie. He sells trinkets by the lake. I just was happening to be sitting out by the lake. He was sitting there. I was like, you know what? I might as well talk to him. And I opened up and I asked him the same question that I ask all these elder gentlemen. If you had the chance to talk to young people and give them some wisdom, what would you tell them? And he just teared up, man. He was like, we've been killing each other for years. Nothing is going to make it stop. Nothing is going to make violence stop. All you can do now is believe in God a little bit more. And I just thought it was really powerful for him to be that open with me, just a person on the street. This is ogtoldme.com. This is the website that I'm talking about. It's also the picture from the cover of the book. As I said, the photo essay lives online. It's a matter of over 75 interviews with elders in the streets of Oakland. And sometime I went to Detroit and Washington, D.C. as well. Because if you're talking to black men, you got to go to Washington, D.C. and Detroit. And so that lives online to this day. The book itself is a coming-of-age story of me growing up in Oakland. 12 essays of what it's like to be a young man in Oakland, go out, do some dumb stuff with your friends, and some older guys like, hey, youngsters, stop doing dumb stuff. Not in those words. And they're for sale. The books are for sale in the back, if I haven't mentioned. They're $15 a piece. Shirts are also for sale. These are regulars only. This is a totally different thing that I do with my friends, but I just wanted to make sure I'd let that be known. Without further ado, I wanted to share this piece with you. It was the last day of classes before winter break, 7th grade. I had lost my virginity earlier that month on a minimum day. I remember sneaking the girl into my aunt's apartment, and in no time, I was sneaking her right back out of that place. When the girl told me to act like it had never happened, I sat silently. My facial expression spoke for me. I wish it never did happen. That's all sex was about. Seemed like too much of a risk for that little bit of pleasure. I prayed to God that I didn't catch anything, and I prayed even harder that none of me got caught in her. You know, those were my worst fears, having a baby before I was grown and dying before I was old. I cleaned my aunt's bed that same day, but I let those dirty thoughts linger in my head for weeks. The last day of school before winter break, that's when T-Bird and I were on the back of the bus headed from East Oakland toward Mosswood Park. The sun was setting, although it never really rose on that winter day. See, it was a rainy evening in December. Total population on the bus was the two of us, accompanied by the damp newspapers the previous passengers had used as seat covers. Oh, and the bus driver, obviously. The rain on the windshield wipers and the squeak of our rubber tennis shoes were the only noises audible over the roar of the bus. We were dead silent. T-Bird broke the silence with a question that I would later find to be the foreshadowing of bad news for years to come. Hey, you heard about insert name? That's how most conversations about something tragic would start. Fitting the script, T-Bird said, hey, you heard about Noro? I mean, I knew the outline of the story. Our middle school classmate had got murdered in the Central Valley on some gang-related stuff. I had no idea about the details. I didn't want to know, but T-Bird knew Noro. See, Noro had on T-Bird's blue Cowboys hat when he was killed. We were 13 years old. We were just learning how to live life. We had no idea about death. In the same tone that he used when he asked me about Noro's death, in the next breath, I asked T-Bird, hey, you heard about Jasmine? He replied, nah, what happened to her? You could tell that he sensed drama from the stress in his voice. Contrary to previous conversations, this wasn't about death. Nah, just the opposite. She had a baby. I said that with extra emphasis on the word baby. She was the first girl of our age to bring a belly with a child inside of it to our school. At least, she was the first girl that we knew of. We too young for this, man. I remember T-Bird saying as he tagged R.I.P. Noro on the back of the bus. Before the permanent Sharpie ink could dry, the bus driver called us up to the front of the bus. I knew he would kick us off for vandalism. I didn't care. It was one of those days, man. A walk in the rain would have been the perfect icing on the cake. The husky 50-year-old something, Uncle Phil-looking bus driver asked both of us to sit up front to the spots normally reserved for disabled people, the elderly, and the nerds. I overheard your conversation, he said in his best James Earl Jones voice. Then he gave us a lecture on the concept of babies and bullets. When a man dies, a baby is born. Everyone knows that. As he peered between the raindrops and the windshield wipers in order to keep an eye on the road, he continued. But the question is, where does that leave the women and the kids of our community? He had a point. If the women are raising babies and these young men are dying, what type of cycle does that bring about in our community? We saw it live and direct. We lost a friend and a baby was born, all in the same time frame. Now, it's not like Noro was the father of Jasmine's baby, but unfortunately, later in life, we would witness that kind of direct exchange of a father and a child. Nonetheless, at that age, dealing with those aspects of life and death and understanding the exchange was mind-blowing enough. I got off the bus before T-Bird and walked to my house. T stayed on, headed toward the park. I walked through the rain, dwelling on the thought that the bus driver had just put into our heads. Babies and bullets. Is that just simple? Is that just a simple example of life cycle? How can I escape that cycle? On the way home, I stopped and used the payphone to call the same girl that I had sex with. As I huddled in the porta potty scented phone booth, sheltered from the rain, the phone rang. She answered. She busted me out for being on the payphone. Damn, caller ID. I admitted to my house phone being disconnected. After some small talk, she told me that she was on her cycle. I forgot about the smell of urine and exhaled. I bookended the conversation with some more flirtatious small talk and then hung up before my time expired. I walked the rest of the way home wondering what else the bus driver had told and T had talked about. I'll never know, but I remember what the chunky elder gentleman told me before I left the bus. Don't bring anybody in this world and don't take anybody out of it till it's time. You know when it's your time. Enjoy your weekend. On the altar in front of me, I have two elders who I mentioned who passed, and I want to bring up this CD cover. This is a picture of, well, the album is by Little Goo and Barry 400, and they were friends of the gentleman who's pictured on this album cover. His name was Devontae Thomas. Devontae Thomas was the first homicide in Oakland this year, January 4th. Devontae Thomas was also a student of mine at Oakland Tech when I started this OG Told Me project. I'm currently working on a piece with Snap Judgment about homicides in Oakland this year, and hopefully you'll be able to listen to it at the start of next year. But I wanted to bring Devontae Thomas's name into this conversation, not only because he was the first death of this year, but also because Devontae Thomas had a newborn son who was just months old at the time of his death. That cycle of babies and bullets still exists to this day. And I don't completely know what we can do to stop it, but I do know discussing it leads to further understanding. Thank you.
Can everybody help me give a round of applause for Penn?